What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel, and as always, thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys. This past weekend, we had the finale of the 2025 Canadian Motocross Championship as she finished off in Walton, Ontario, and for the first time ever, for at least as far as I know, we have a damn retired champion. Filthy Phil finally did it. Middle fingers to the sky, and middle fingers to the podium. No damn choice. How about that? But what an epic series. It did not lack for entertainment, not even a little bit, and I did a video detailing the first 5 rounds of the championship. Right around mid-season, things started to get super crazy, wild event of turns, and headed into the final 3 rounds, the 450 championship was down to Phil Nicoletti and Tanner Ward, and props to Tanner Ward. He went down in flames going for the championship. And despite being super overlooked heading into the season and not really being considered much of a championship contender, great season for Tanner Ward, and he showed tons of speed and tons of fight. And he had no choice but to try to make hay while the Canadian sun was shining, because the 2 favorites heading into the series, Jess Pettis and Dylan Wright, were having issue after issue, run-ins with each other, and were racing through injuries. And then you had the 250 class, or as they call it up north, MX2, and Preston Kilroy was pretty much in control from the beginning of the series. And Kilroy's biggest challenge should have come from Canadian Ryder McNabb, but unfortunately for him and for the series, McNabb was suffering from some health issues and spent most of the season on the struggle bus, and even missed a few rounds. But with McNabb down and out, the latter part of the series saw Preston Kilroy do exactly what he needed to do to get the title, and we even saw a return from another retired racer who even got a win along the way. So yeah, in summary, an absolutely epic championship up in Canada this year. And in today's video, we'll get into all that went down in the final 3 races in both the 250 and the 450 classes. But before I do that, I got to give a big thank you and a shout out to my channel sponsors. Thank you to ASV Inventions and Sirius Studio. I have links and discount codes in my video description, and if you're supporting them, you're supporting me. Let's get into it. After my last video, there were 3 rounds to go in the series, and the 450 points were being led by Tanner Ward with 193 points. Second in points was Phil Nicoletti, only 8 down, with third being Quinn Amyot, 15 back. And then 4th place was the eccentric Dutchman, beach racer Lars van Berkel, with the first main contender, Jess Pettis, all the way back in the 5 spot, 46 points down. 6th was Daniel Elmore, and then the other contender, Dylan Wright, was in 7th in points, a whopping 55 points down after issue, whether it be gas tank related, crash related, or anything in between. And coming into this final stretch of 3 races, Tanner Ward had all the momentum, 2 overall wins in a row, with a couple of bad races in a row from all the contenders, including Phil Nicoletti, but in true Phil fashion, he buckled down, flipped off the entire field, and executed the end of the series to near perfection. But no doubt, it was a dramatic championship fight that went down all the way to the final moto. Let's go ahead and get into it round by round. Starting at round 6 at Riverglade MX, a hard-packed, rocky track in Moncton, New Brunswick. First motos were Titty City, but second motos had a big rainstorm and a total mudfest. And in the 450 class, the overall went to a wounded Jess Pettis with a 1-2, but in second overall, this is where Phil Nicoletti started doing some work and clawing into this championship lead. A third in the first moto, followed up by a win in the mud in Moto 2, barely held on over Jess Pettis and gained 7 points on Tanner Ward, bringing him to within 1 point of the Canadian. And despite losing points on Phil Nicoletti, Tanner Ward still put in a good day with a 4-3 for third overall. Coming home 4th was Quinn Amyot, hanging on by a thread to try to stay in that championship battle, and then rounding out the top 5 with a 2 and a 10. I couldn't even tell you guys what the issue in Moto 2 was, but what I can tell you is inconsistent days like this were totally in the contract for Dylan Wright. Then onto the 250 class, a lot less of a drama-filled championship as Preston Kilroy nabbed another overall win with a 1-2. And then how about Dylan Walsh? The dude must have prayed to Christchurch because his bike actually made it through the day. And after several mechanicals in a row, he goes 3-1 for a second overall. And then on the box, I don't really know anything about this guy, but the Tri-Muff Blake Davies lands it in third. And as far as the championship was concerned, Riverglade only made it even more of a snoozer because Kilroy had a great day, and his 2 closest rivals, Sebastian Racine and Dylan Rempel, were a little bit off, back in 4th and 11th overall. And of course, you gotta love seeing the NESC guys injecting themselves into the series. Kyle Murdoch and Joe Tate, 5 and 6 from the boys from New England. Next up, round 7 at Deschambault in Quebec, one of the coolest looking tracks I've ever seen in the entire world. Epic sand track, cool elevation, and even has a big ass jump. And in the 450 class, another win for Jess Pettis with a 2-1, splitting motos with Phil Nicoletti. Another solid day for Tanner Ward with a 3-4 and third overall. Fourth went to visiting Frenchman Adrien Malival, with Lars Van Berkel rounding out the top 5. And even though the dude's tougher than a damn $2 steak, no Dylan Wright at Deschambault, too banged up, and finally had no choice but to take a round off. And Deschambault would prove to be very pivotal in the championship because 2 rounds ago, Tanner Ward appeared to be in control. But after 2 good rounds in a row from Phil Nicoletti, the man with supposedly no luck had finally caught a couple of breaks, put some races together, and was headed into the final round with the championship lead. And then in the 250 class, maybe not a surprise to all you Canadians, and especially those of you in Quebec, but I had no idea that Kevin Benoit was still barking. He was last year's champion, and I think he's well into his 30s. And who knows how straight up it was, because Preston Kilroy had a championship on the mind, but Kevin Benoit with an overall win in his one pro race of the year, a 1-2 over Sebastian Racine, who goes 4-1 for second overall. And then third on the day, he lost the battle but won the war. Preston Kilroy wraps up the 2025 250 Canadian Motocross Championship with a 2-3. The dude even got it done a round early, and then rounding out the top 5, Dylan Rempel and Wyatt Kerr. Following Deschambault, the series took a 1-week break, headed into the final round, round 8 at Walton Raceway, a hard-packed track that seems to get pretty sticky with some gnarly ruts. And on top of holding the finale for the Pro Championship, Walton is also the site of the Walton Transcan, which is basically a Canadian Loretta's. And at the finale, in the 450 class, the overall goes to Jess Pettis with a 1-1, still wounded, but the man of the hour, the man, the myth, and the legend, Phil Nicoletti, goes 3-4 and does exactly what he needs to do to seal up the championship. He came in with a 6-point gap, so nothing crazy, but he controlled his own destiny, and after Moto 1, with Tanner Ward getting second and Phil getting third, that gap was down to just 4 points heading into the final moto. And in that final moto, you gotta give it to Tanner Ward because he was probably doing his best riding of the season, all over Jess Pettis and battling for the win. He was doing everything he needed to do and leaving it all on the track, but he had a high-speed, massive Whiplash National in the roller section, big crash, and that was all she wrote for the championship. And Ward's a dog. He still got up and he still finished the moto in 9th place. And I even had somebody tell me that he actually works for his current team in the off-season as like a carpenter or something like that. He goes racing in the summer and goes tit for tat in Titty City with some of the best in the country. But Ward goes down in flames, Phil does exactly what he needs to do, and then rounding out the podium, a surprise ride from Gavin Bruff taking advantage of some of the absolute madness. 4th was Josh Boaz, and then 5th was Tanner Ward, and then 6th, gotta give a shout out to Preston Masiangelo. Dude raced Ironman on Saturday and Walton on Sunday. That's Gnarls Barkley. And don't let the results sheet fool you. Dylan Wright was here, he was back in action. He was leading the first moto and had another issue with the gas tank. And in Moto 2, I don't even know what the problem was, but this poor dude just had one issue after another. What a bummer of a season. And then in the 250 class, win number 2 for Dylan Rempel over Preston Kilroy, a consistent 3-3 for 3rd overall for Club MX's Ryder Malinowski. He didn't race Loretta's, and I have no clue why, but he's getting his feet wet in Canada and putting in some great results. 4th was Dylan Walsh, and then 5th was Noah Viney. Ryder McNabb was back in action for the finale, but it was a disaster, going 38 in a DNS, and then another tough day for Sebastian Racine, DNF 4, but we can work with speed, no choice. And just like that, that's a wrap on the 2025 Canadian Motocross Championship. And in the 450 class, unbelievably, your champion is Phil Nicoletti after not even winning a single overall. But he caps off the unlikely title fight between himself and Tanner Ward with 3 second-place finishes, stacked some points, and did exactly what he needed to do. Huge props to Tanner Ward, 2nd overall in the points, and definitely overperformed for what everybody thought heading into the season, maybe even surpassed his own goals. And then, after winning 5 races but suffering from mechanicals, injuries, incidents, and more, Jess Pettis wraps up 3rd in the championship and makes a statement after winning the final 3 rounds. A good series and some podiums for Quinn Amiot as he comes home 4th in the championship. 5th goes to Lars Van Berkel, and then what a bummer, all the way down in 7th for one of the favorites, Dylan Wright. But if every other moto is a DNF due to a mechanical, exploding gas tank, or a crash, being a little further back in the points is unfortunately going to be in your contract. And then in the 250 class, commanding championship win for Preston Kilroy, never really challenged, and then an awesome season and 2nd overall for Dylan Rempel. 3rd went to Sebastian Racine, 4th was Blake Davies, and then after 6 or 9 DNFs a weekend, Dylan Walsh rounds out the top 5. But that's a wrap on the series, and after about 28 retirement parties, Filthy Phil Nicoletti is the champ. And what do you guys think? Are we going to see him back next year to defend the number 1 plate, or is he just going to go back into fake retirement? Phil says he's done, but we've heard it before, never say never. And what a story this was. The dude who claims to have nothing but bad luck finally catches a couple of breaks and is leaving the sport on top. I know it's not a US championship and it's just the Great White North in Canada, but still, how badass is it that Phil Nicoletti gets to leave as a champion? For a dude that appeared to be coming into the series for a bit of a fun farewell tour, this thing ended about as good as anybody could have asked for, and congratulations to Phil Nicoletti. Well deserved. And of course, gotta throw a big shout out to Preston Kilroy for wrapping up the 250 MX2 championship. He's a great rider and he was right on the cusp of some US success, but he headed to the Great White North and has definitely made the most of it. And unfortunately, as far as talent from the United States is concerned, the series as of late has not quite had the star power that they used to have back in the day. But in 2025, 2 American champions, so maybe that'll reignite the spark for Americans to go get that money in Canada. Having more contenders and more Americans could only be good for the series, but either way, that series was unbelievable. It had drama, crashes, championship battles, and everything in between. And this is just one man's opinion, but I don't think it's going to get any less exciting anytime soon. No love lost between Dylan Wright and Jess Pettis. The rivalry went to a totally new level this year, and I think it's only going to continue to heat up in the coming years. I mean, shoot, this rivalry has even bled into the Motocross of Nations Canada team selection. Pettis does not want to be on a team with Dylan Wright, and likely vice versa, so the team has been named with Jess Pettis on it and Dylan Wright not. But all that aside, hell of a series, and Phil's the champ, a feel-good national, and you gotta love it. But I appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you all for watching, and let me know what you guys think of my takes, what you think of the video. If you think I'm cooked, if my takes suck, or anything in between, we're here for all of it. Catch you guys next time.